From the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., Cole on Congress. The program discussing national issues that affect Oklahoma. Your host, U.S. Representative Tom Cole.
Thank you for joining me today for another episode of Cole on Congress. Today I'm pleased to welcome my very good friend, Congressman Joe Wilson, to the program. Joe's represented the 2nd District of South Carolina since 2002. He won that actually in a special election. He serves on the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Education and Workforce Committee, and the Armed Services Committee, where he chairs the subcommittee on military personnel. Joe, thanks for coming, and I always like to start these things a little bit personal. I consider you, frankly, one of my really closest friends and mentors in Congress. You'd just gotten there a few months before I showed up in 2003, but we sat next to one another on the Ed and Workforce Committee and on Armed Services. We were close to, I think there was one guy in between us for about 6 years. And you took me actually on my first foreign trip. I don't know if you'll remember that or not. Or second, my first one was to Iraq. The second one was with you to celebrate. It's actually one of the most moving things I ever got to go to, the 60th anniversary at D-Day, where we went and saw some, of course, America's greatest heroes and the 60th anniversary of that absolutely heroic achievement. So, again, welcome to the show.
Well, Tom, it's great to be with you, and I appreciate your service for the people of Oklahoma. You stand up for what's right. You're a fighter for limited government, expanded freedom for the people of our country. And indeed, I do remember our extraordinary visit for the 60th anniversary of Normandy, the invasion, the success. You and I were there together to see the extraordinary National Cemetery, recognizing the American military who gave their lives so that you and I could have the ability to have the privilege of serving. So I'm just so grateful to be with you.
Well, I want to brag on you a little bit more and give you an opportunity to tell our listeners and our viewers a little bit about your family, because you not only served over 30 years in the National Guard yourself. Right. I want you to tell our audience, if you will, about your extraordinary family and just the remarkable things they've done and, frankly, the great things they do for the country.
Well, thank you, Tom. I am very, very appreciative. I give all credit to my wife, and that is
a very smart man.
And so Roxanne gets a lot of credit. We have 4 sons currently serving in the military. We're really so pleased. This summer, our youngest son was commissioned a 2nd lieutenant as an engineer, a graduate of Clemson University, and so he'll be serving, and he's already drilling and has been for the past year with the South Carolina Army National Guard. His next older brother is a headquarters company commander, Aviation Support Battalion in South Carolina in the Guard. He has served in Egypt with the National Guard. The next son is a doctor in the Navy. He served with the Rangers and the SEALs in Iraq. I'm very proud of his service. He's a graduate of the Naval Academy. And then our oldest son has served for a year in Iraq with the Field Artillery. Which
means he, of course, trained at Fort Sill.
And he was trained at Fort Sill, and we give so much credit, I do, to his training at Fort Sill. It really matured him. It truly has made him all that he can be. And I have to point out, he served for a year, then he came back and married the newscaster of the largest television station in South Carolina, Jennifer Miskowitz, which then put him in position last election. He is now the youngest Attorney General in the United States. And so we give Oklahoma Fort Sill credit.
Well, I think we probably can't take too much credit for those achievements.
No. Hey, Fort Sill was a life-changing experience. And I saw this firsthand. My dad served in the Flying Tigers during World War II. So we have a family history of appreciation of military service and the opportunities that military service can provide for the young people of our country.
Well, it's an extraordinary thing, and People don't often think that members of Congress have families that, like yours, honestly, that have served and sacrificed so much generation after generation. So I wanted to get a plug. I've had the opportunity to meet each of your 4 sons at various points. You had a couple of them with you actually on that trip to Normandy, so they would see and learn and remember the sacrifice other Americans had made so they could enjoy freedoms. It's a great story, Joe.
Well, and it gives me a real feeling of serving the military. I'm chairman of the Military Personnel Subcommittee of the Armed Services Committee, and so I have a real passion for our military, for military families and veterans. And then the district that I represent is unique. We're very grateful for the number of people from Oklahoma who have trained at Fort Jackson.
Absolutely.
We're very grateful. Parris Island is so important for our country, for the Marine Corps Air Station. And so the different military facilities that I represent really are an inspiration to me of the people serving.
Well, thanks again. You're here on an interesting day. By the time anybody hears or sees this, they'll know that we had a miserable month in the creation of new jobs for Americans, much, much worse than predicted. The unemployment rate ticked up again to 9.2%, only 18,000 jobs this month, and we're expecting 150 or more thousand. So I'd like to get your take, number one, on what, if anything, is working in the president's approach to the economy. What are some of the things that you think he's doing that need to change?
Well, it really is tragic. Today, unemployment went up to 9.2%. And in the communities that I represent, I'm very concerned. We have long-term unemployment. One county that I represent actually has had unemployment up to 24%. So this is catastrophic for American families. And we know that the wasteful stimulus plan that the president had now has been a tragic failure. We also can see the president's efforts on additional regulations which are killing jobs. We can see the tax policies and the effect of Obamacare killing jobs. The National Federation of Independent Business has said that Obamacare by itself will kill 1.6 million jobs. Over and over again, the initiatives of this president have been a failure. He really should be, and I want to thank you for your efforts to promote the Republican alternative. And it is an alternative, cut and grow. Cut taxes and grow, and it should be bipartisan. This was not just a Tom Cole initiative. You and I put things together that John F. Kennedy had done. It should be bipartisan. It was to cut taxes, grow the economy. And of course, Ronald Reagan, you cut taxes, grow the economy. But what the president has proposed, his initiatives, truly have been killing jobs. And then in South Carolina, we've seen direct efforts by the president to kill jobs.
Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about that, because South Carolina really is probably the focal point of the greatest struggle in modern times over labor unions, the free operation of a free market economy, and of course direct government intrusion. If you would, tell our audience a little bit about what the National Labor Relations Board has done to chill growth. A great American company, Boeing, wants to do business in South Carolina, has invested, I guess, $1 billion in their facility to produce their new state-of-the-art Dreamliners, and we've got a government agency trying to stop that.
And this is really startling. I've worked on economic development, Tom, all my life. I had the privilege of working with former Governor Jim Edwards to recruit Michelin to South Carolina. We have a dozen Michelin plants employing thousands of people. We're a right-to-work state, just like Oklahoma. People want to work. They want to have the opportunity to join a union or not. And so I was there to work with Michelin. I worked with the late Governor Carroll Campbell, a friend of yours, who helped bring BMW to South Carolina in the midst of the economic meltdown of the automobile industry in the United States. Just 3 years ago, BMW announced that they were going to increase $750 million, new jobs, to provide for production of new vehicles, an increase from 160,000 to 260,000. It is in place today. And so we know the success of Right to Work. But at the same time, I'm very grateful we were able 2 years ago to recruit Boeing to South Carolina. I was at the groundbreaking 2 years ago. I went to, earlier this spring, I visited the facility. It is built, 1.1 million square feet. 1,000 people have been employed. And then out of the blue, the NLRB has intervened and said that the plant cannot be opened. This was clearly the development of a second line, Tom, of 787 Dreamliners to be built there, not moving the first line from Washington State, but the creation of a second line. We have 1,000 families right now who are under assault by NLRB. The consequence of this is utterly bizarre. And so I've been working with the local member of Congress there, Tim Scott from Charleston, and we have a Job Protection Act which will clarify that the NLRB cannot determine where American companies can locate, that American companies will have and manufacturing companies have the ability to locate wherever they would like. And also it clarifies something that we thought we had, free speech. And that is that employers and employees can express their view about unionization efforts.
Well, one of the things that's shocking to me about that particular case is, as again our viewers and listeners will know, the argument that the NLRB makes is the opening up of this facility was somehow an assault on a unionized plant back in Washington, D.C. But as you pointed out, that plant was not closed. As a matter of fact, additional workers were hired at that plant. The idea was, look, we've got a great workforce in South Carolina. We want to have an alternate line of production or an additional line, and then somebody just happened to make a statement, you know, and they have less labor problems in South Carolina. That's an advantage for us. And boom, that became essentially the grounds to shut down $1 billion facility and threaten the jobs of thousands of people in South Carolina.
It really, Tom, is just beyond imagination, because truly at this same production site, the fuselages by Vought aircraft had already been produced. And so there was a history of aerospace technology and investment. And back in Washington State, over 1,000 jobs have been created since the facility has been completed in South Carolina. So this was not taking jobs. And it just shows how out of control big government is, and it needs to be reined in. And we certainly need to make every effort to pass the Job Protection Act, but the NLRB simply has gotten out of control.
Well, I want to switch you to another area, because you're one of the Congress's leading experts on defending the country. You've done it yourself, your family's done it for generations, but you sit on the most important committee, the House Armed Services Committee. I was there with you for 6 years. I tried to persuade you to join me on appropriations, but you've become too senior and powerful where you're at. So I'd like you to give us an assessment of, frankly, how the administration's doing in the area of defense. And then I'm going to move you into some more specific areas, because I really want your views on Afghanistan and Libya as well. But overall, where do you see the defense budget going right now?
Well, the defense budget itself needs to be, everything should be factually justified. But I believe that we have people misunderstanding the level of expenditures for our military. That, to me, the primary function of the national government is national defense. So we need to be focused on funding national defense. But this administration, to me, has indicated weakness, whether it be in the missile defense system, where we insulted our allies of the Czech Republic and Poland. We really cut their legs. Additionally,
by pulling out the missile defense system we had promised to install there.
By being so equivocating. And we've given, sadly, this administration has given false hope to the megalomaniacs of Iran. And we know that at the same time that the Iranians have developed a missile capability that can not only strike Israel, our ally, but now they have a missile capability they can strike southeastern Europe, Greece, Romania, Bulgaria, Ukraine, as far east as India. All of these countries now are within range of Iranian missiles. And when there was a real effort for regime change, the young people of Iran do not want to live in an authoritarian state. They want to live as other countries in the region now are developing democracy. But the president really turned his back on the democracy demonstrators, and then he's gotten us involved in Libya, which I think is something that we really should not be involved.
Well, of course, as you know, I share your opinion on Libya, and none of us are big fans of Muammar Gaddafi. We all know this is a terrible regime, but as I said recently on the House floor, two things. Number one, you have to remember they never attacked the United States. Libya didn't attack NATO. Libya never allowed al-Qaeda to operate with impunity within its territory. Libya turned over most of its nuclear material to us back in 2003 after they saw what happened to Saddam Hussein. So as distasteful as Muammar Gaddafi is, I don't see any justification for us being at war. The thing that bothered me, and I know many members on both sides of the aisle more, if it's possible, is the fact that the president basically circumvented the Constitution and violated the War Powers Resolution by going to war without congressional authorization. And then later told us, well, this didn't rise to the level of hostilities under the War Powers Resolution. Now, where I'm from, if you park a ship off somebody's coast and fire 228 Tomahawks at them, you have 100 Predator strikes, you fly over 1,000 combat sorties, and you refuel the NATO planes that have thrown 3,000 or more, that's a pretty hostile act. If somebody did that to us, we would consider it an act of war. So how you could not consider that an act of war and not go before the Congress, which the Constitution says, that's where war-making authority resides, and that's who's got to fund a war. In this case, we haven't authorized the use of military force. We haven't voted a single nickel to fund these operations.
And you've been successful, Tom. I want to congratulate you this week as we were considering the National Defense Authorization Act, Appropriations Act. You had an amendment that made it very clear that there should not be funding for what are called the rebel forces. We don't know who the rebel forces are, and you've been very convincing, and that was a really strong vote by members of Congress. We want to be obviously supportive of our president, but his actions are a total disregard of not to us, to the American people. The message, the why we're there, who we're working with, is not clear at all. And then you truly indicated too the hypocrisy of that this is not hostile action. Of course it's hostile action. And so I want to thank you and congratulate you. You were very, as you just stated, I mean, you were very convincing, and it was a bipartisan vote.
It was.
And you made your case, and I certainly hope the White House pays attention.
Well, I'm not holding my breath, but we don't tend to quit in this fight until we get done. I actually think, what's at stake here long term is of historic significance, because if you allow the war-making authority of Congress to erode, and people, whether they were for the Gulf War or for American military action in Iraq and Afghanistan, look, George H.W. Bush came to the Congress of the United States back in 1990 and asked for permission, got it from a Democratic Congress. Obviously, President George W. Bush came in 2001 and 2002 again, requested the authorization for the use of force, got it. This president's using force without ever having come to the Congress, and it's just, it's something we can't allow to continue.
And it is. The precedent of it is what people should look at. I look at it as a veteran myself, as a member of a military family. I want our president to follow the Constitution of our country, and going to war should be an action which is left to the people of our country through Congress.
I couldn't agree more. Well, I want to also get your view, because we've had major developments recently, and you were stalwart and have been every step of the way on Iraq when times were tough and a lot of people wanted to quit. You were there supporting the surge, and I know you honestly were very supportive, as certainly I was. when President Obama put additional forces into Afghanistan. He got bipartisan support from Republicans in Congress. We knew it was a tough decision for him. We supported that. We ultimately were successful, I think, in Iraq, and we're drawing down on schedule according to the status of forces agreement that former President Bush negotiated. It's a fragile democracy, but it's a functioning democracy. It's worked. And in Afghanistan, I don't have any doubt we've made terrific progress, again, under General Petraeus and this Afghan surge, if you will. President, though, recently announced, really maybe not over the objections, but somewhat in opposition to the military advice he had been given, that he was going to draw down faster and draw down more troops than our ground commanders felt. So on the one hand, look, if we can succeed faster, I'm all for it. We'll still have a substantial force there. On the other hand, again, you see more information than most people. What's your view of how we're conducting our Afghan policy? What are you optimistic about? What are you worried about?
Well, I appreciate that you've really brought up the key fact, and that is we have an extraordinary military leader with General David Petraeus, and that's who we should be counting on. And when the president's right, such as the surge of troops into Afghanistan, as we saw the success of the surge of troops into Iraq, but we should be counting on our military giving us advice. This should not be a political war where people move troops around based on recent polling information. And in fact, just this week, everything should be conditions-based. We found out that Iran is sending enhanced munitions into Iraq, into Afghanistan, to influence the course of the hostilities. We need to count on our military to give us advice on how to face the enemy who have every intent. Tom, I still am so convinced how evil the people are that we're facing. Just within the last couple of weeks, a small 9-year-old little girl was strapped with a bomb vest and sent in Afghanistan into a police station, and as she approached, they didn't even give her time to get inside. They blew her up. These people are so insidious. There's nothing to discuss. And if they would do that to their own people, of course, that's their goal to do it to us. And so we must be successful. I'm really grateful my National Guard unit has served for a year that I served in, and I retired, and then they served for a year in Afghanistan, training the Afghan police and army units. I have faith in our military.
Well, yeah, again, you've shown that again and again. I want to also ask you to think a little long-term about defense. You've served with 2 secretaries of defense, obviously with Secretary Rumsfeld, then with Secretary Gates. He's just leaving now. Secretary Panetta is just beginning his time. We all know him as the former chief of staff for President Clinton, also as director of the Office of Management and Budget, and as I don't know how many terms, 8 terms or something like that on the Hill, and chairman of the Budget Committee. So he's had a very distinguished career. So I kind of like your assessment of him, and what are the concerns that you have about the military going forward?
Well, the key thing that I do is that I will place faith in the new secretary. I look forward to working with him. I believe that he is a person who truly has a distinguished record of public service. I know that he knows that our country is facing challenges all over the world, where there is a rising level of instability around the world. This is not a time, and we are at war. In fact, obviously, sadly, we're concluding successfully in Iraq. We're involved in Afghanistan. We're in a 3rd war in Libya. We are at war. But there's instability throughout the Middle East. There's instability in our hemisphere. We know that there's a potential for instability in the Far East, and certainly we have a bizarre fellow in North Korea who
that's very diplomatically put.
with nuclear capability and missiles again. So we know North Korea is a threat to the world. And so at this time, it's more important than ever that we have a strong military, and we know it's Ronald Reagan. It's peace through strength. And if we give any indication of weakness, a withdrawal without looking at conditions, without going to the military, that gives encouragement to people who have every intent to destroy our way of life. But I look forward to working with the new secretary. We've got a great leader in Buck McKeon as chairman of the Armed Services Committee. We've got really good leadership to work with the new secretary.
Well, you're getting up there pretty senior. I think one day you're going to chair that committee personally. But let me ask you this, because you do chair the very important committee on military personnel, and we think obviously of the conflict and the soldiers and everything they do, but I know there's a saying on that committee: you recruit a soldier and you retain a family.
Yes.
And so I'd like your thoughts on some of the challenges that military families are facing, and some of the things perhaps you're working on to try and be helpful.
Well, the American people need to know that we have a higher percentage of married military personnel than ever in history. This is good, but it does mean, as you just indicated, that military families and their attention is more important than ever. And I'm really grateful. In my 31 years of service, I saw an increasing, even while I was there, attention to military families. But we are now very cognizant of the importance of military families, and the best way that we can help them too is dwell time. We are working for a period such as in the, I was with the leaders of the Army Reserve and National Guard, of having a 3 or 6 month service period and then a 4-year dwell time back at home. That's for Guard and Reserve members. And then with active duty, we're working for dwell time so that they can be with their families, and so that we can make sure that families are secure, that we are attentive to the needs of families, because it's just more important than ever that we show attention to military families.
Well, I know the President's planning to reduce the size, the end strength, if you will, of the Army, which causes me enormous concern because, again, when your Army's too small, that's one of the reasons why we've deployed the National Guard as frequently as we have. And what do you have? What are your thoughts in terms of end strength?
The end strength and drawdown, I share your concerns. It needs to be looked at truly and as the military recommends. And the dwell time is so important, but the disruptions to families, we know the consequence of post-traumatic stress disorder, of traumatic brain injury. All of these need to be addressed, and we do have military leaders who are addressing these issues, but with a drawdown of forces without considering the consequences of the conditions, the challenges that we're facing around the world.
No, it's going to be a major challenge. Last question. We only have a few seconds left. I don't know anybody that's served the country in as many ways as you have in the Congress of the United States. What's your best hope? What's your worst fear looking forward?
Well, my best hope is that we've had a remarkable change in Congress with the new Congress that was elected in the last election. I'm hoping very much for change in the next election cycle. We need to have people who are dedicated to limited government, expanded freedom. I'm very, very concerned with the debt ceiling debate. We see the government the spending, the borrowing is out of control. Senior citizens are at risk, the value of the dollar. The young people of our country are going to be burdened with debts that will inhibit their ability to truly achieve to their highest levels. So my concern is that this may not be properly addressed, but I have faith in the American people.
Well, you know, you've shown that your whole life, Joe, and again, it's just been an honor to have you on this show. Time moves by fast when you're with a good friend who fights the good fight. So thanks for your service, and thanks for the extraordinary service of your children and the extraordinary sacrifice of both you and your wife, allowing them and encouraging them to serve in the way they have.
Tom, it's an honor to be with you.
Good to have you, my friend.
Best wishes.